Okay. Black Pope. All right. Let's see if I'm in the frame. Okay, so we have 2 to 3 influences in this painting. Number one, Kerry James Marshall, the self-portrait painting from 1980. Was that 81 or 82? Can't remember. Um, Definitely a very inspirational piece because it's like a portrait of the artist as his former self or something like that. And like, man, it just it, the energy of that portrait kind of reminds me of like a Tyler the Creator type of like pose or like picture. Let me see if I can get something like that. Hold up. See, Tyler the Creator. Because he got that gap tooth. He has like an iconic, look for somebody in the black community that is like popping. Like, look at me, come on. He got that look, bro. You know, it's that like eccentric, like African American, like you know, I'm on my alternative shit. Probably has nothing to do with this painting, by the way, but every time I look at that painting by Kerry James Marshall, which I'm about to show y'all in a second, I always get that flashback. And it's this one right here. I mean, look how iconic this thing is, bro. Look at it. We got the hat, you got the silhouette, you got like the missing tooth and that thing, the eyes. It's like one thing I like about paintings is black, the color black. The idea of using the word black in a painting, like Francisco de Goya with the black paintings he did in the Deaf Man's Castle or whatever. I think was it Deaf Man Castle. Um, the idea of like creating something that could be disturbing. This painting is not disturbing to me, but when I look at it, it could be disturbing to others because it looked like a blackface painting, and it's not. Um, I mean, you got other painters that use black, but they're more action painters. I think like Robert Motherwell. That's one of my favorite black painters, but he's white. Um, but the idea of Kerry James Marshall to do this was a genius. Mostly because I later on, got inspired to do the Black Pope painting before we had a Black Pope. All right, go back to the Black Pope. Trying to get all these inspirational, motivational ideas out of my mind right now as I talk about it. And one thing that comes to mind is the color white. Now, a lot of my paintings, if you look in my archives, have to deal with the idea of the color white. You know, I'm not buffering, huh? All right, so yeah, the idea of white covering the black. Um, I think I've been doing that since when was the first painting? I don't even think I have this like in the archives in my computer. But I did a bunch of paintings for the Ogden. I did Cubic King. So, painting over the black with the white is like a great contrast, bro, because it's like you get to see the brush strokes and stuff like that. And that's one thing I really want people to see is the labor that goes into the work. So those brush strokes kind of is a ping pong matchup of how busy the painting is with the line work. Hot Girl Summer, they had a lot of oil pastels being used for the line works. Let me go back in there and see. I get that Hot Girl Summer. So yeah, this is like an oily painting right here. So like all these lines. This is a paint pen. Did I start using paint pens around this time? So yeah. So at one point I was using paint oil pastels to do my line work, but then I switched over to paint pens, acrylic base paint pens, and using a lot of that oil pastels to do a lot of the line works at one point. This is me transitioning from the oil pastel line work. Let's see. This right here has none, but I wanted to have like that idea of that caked on look, like an all pastel. So I had to like really lay it on thick with that acrylic. See? A little close up. You got the blue underneath because I like that contrast of painting on top of some pigment that's already there. Because that blue gonna bounce off that red, and that red and that gold goes good together. That black and gold goes amazing. Let's see what's happening. So let's see Solomon. Got the quote right here. Solomon. Okay, we're gonna get that quote in there. Let y'all know what it is. It can go like maybe 3 different ways with that Solomon quote. Let's see. Solomon. Make sure I get that quote right. One 5-6. Oh god, it's like a long ass pass. Do I have time to read that? I am dark, yet lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. It's just me having like a quote about being black. So if whoever buys this painting, I still have this painting in my inventory. Funny enough, like it's in my inventory. I don't know why it's still there. But some paintings you can sell instantly. Some paintings I can't sell instantly. This one right here, I'm surprised I still got it. But look at some more influences. I have Diego Velasquez as one of my influences for here, which is this Pope painting that he did. I'm gonna show you videos about both these things: the Pope painting right here and the portrait of Kerry James Marshall. I gotta get a juxtaposition right here. Gotta juxtapose. Look at these guys. Look at these guys, huh? Look at these. Look at these guys, huh? You know, hovering around the idea of who is a black pope before we even have one. The black pope we have is, I think, Pope Francis. This gentleman right here. He has roots in Chicago. He has roots in the 7th Ward of New Orleans also. So I think maybe a month after I painted the painting of the Black Pope, he was selected as the new Pope. So let's get into a couple of these videos. I don't think I have anything pulled up specifically. But
Squash this will come from.
Shout out to Silky. I don't know, but he's a very good streamer. Pope. Actually, let's go Kerry James Marshall. Portrait of my former self.
A couple of months ago, I stumbled upon this picture. It was, of course, accompanied by its title, a portrait of the artist as a shadow of his former self, its date, 1980, and the artist who made it, Kerry James Marshall. The portrait shocked me, and it's pretty easy to know why. It's the depiction of a black man against a black background, and all you can see is the man's white shirt, eyes, and teeth. It almost looks like a caricature, and some have even likened it to blackface. I wasn't the first person to be shocked by this painting. When Steven Lebovitz bought it in 1984 for $850, he decided to hang it on a wall in his house. Some guests took offense to it, deemed it racist, and Lebovitz, to avoid further confrontation, hung it in his bathroom where it would be hidden for 25 years. The painting would be invisibilized. In the description of the painting, the novel Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison was mentioned, and, admittingly, I hadn't heard about it, so I did some research and finally read it. It's an absolutely amazing book which I strongly recommend to anyone, no matter your ethnic background. The book deals a lot on the topic of race, more specifically on being a black man in early 20th century America. The narrator, who's also the main character, struggles with racial inequality, whether through his relationship with white people or through systemic violence with evictions and police brutality. But there's another topic aside from race which makes this novel an amazing Bildungsroman, or a coming-of-age story. The author explores the theme of identity. Of course, many of us have this existential struggle with the idea of identity. In Invisible Man, however, Ellison shows how this struggle to discover or create one's own identity is even harder when you mix race into it. Throughout the novel, the nameless narrator finds himself in different communities or groups of people, and he tries, as we often do, to craft his identity through his interactions with other people. But this turns out to be extremely unproductive. Everybody he meets expects him to behave a certain way. When he doesn't obey, when he affirms himself and subverts these expectations, he finds himself alienated. These expectations towards the narrator are more often than not linked to his skin color. He is reduced to his blackness. His character, his individuality, can't be complex, it can't be nuanced, it can't be human. While white people can define their identity through their passions, their interests, or their occupation, black people can only define their identity through their blackness. This reduction to one's race is what renders the narrator invisible. It's what makes him an invisible man. When society looks at you and sees you not for who you are, but for what you are, your individuality is concealed. You are not, for example, Ralph Ellison, you are a black man. This theme of invisibility through blackness is what is being shown here. This isn't a twisted joke on the appearance of black people, but a statement on their disappearance in the public eye. This painting is also a landmark in Kerry James Marshall's own quest for identity. As he explained, the painting has different elements of many different art movements, which shows that Marshall is experimenting and trying to find his own voice. For example, the painting is made in egg tempera, which is a medium with a lot of history, going as far back as ancient Egypt. You can also see a touch of minimalism through, notably, a monochromatic portrait. Finally, Marshall said to have experimented with surrealism through the title of the painting, a portrait of the artist as a shadow of his former self. One thing for certain is that the title speaks of Marshall's artistic growth, but it's honestly slightly confusing, and I'd like to hear your interpretation of it in the comment section. As I was doing research for this video, I watched a conversation on the YouTube channel Tate Talks, where Kerry James Marshall comments this painting. He explains how he wanted to add nuance to the color black, the same way Ellison wanted to add nuance to black identity. Marshall disagrees with the idea that black is the absence of color, and argues that black is actually a chromatically rich color. He makes this point through a portrait of the artist as a shadow of his former self because, though the painting is black and white, we can tell the difference between the different blacks. This difference is what allows us to differentiate the subject from the background. This nuance in the different blacks is what allows us to see the subject. A similar exercise was made a couple of years earlier, between 1957 and 1967, by the abstract expressionist Ad Reinhardt. If we look, for example, at his 1961 painting titled Abstract Painting, we see, at first glance, but a black canvas. Looking at a room full of Reinhardt's ultimate paintings, as he would call them, can be a bit underwhelming at first. But if you stay a little longer to look at these paintings, if you spend time with them, if you put effort into understanding them, then you'll start seeing that they're more than just black canvases, but that they're also complex and nuanced. Each black painting made by Reinhardt has different nuances of black inside of them, which can only be perceived if we look at them long enough. For both Marshall's and Reinhardt's paintings, we need to give them time and look into them to understand them. Without the research, Marshall's painting is a racist joke, and without time, Reinhardt's painting is just a black canvas. To fully understand, appreciate, and accept artworks, they require openness and a will to actually understand them, to see them for the complex creations that they are. Marshall's work not only reminds us of that, but it reminds us that this is also applicable to people. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, I'd encourage you to subscribe. And as always, I'd like to thank all of the Canvas's patrons for the support. It's really...
Shout out to him. I think I follow him. Alright, it's gonna be an easy, quick one. Here we go. Please let this be an explain video. Nah, okay. Where should I go? Okay, we're gonna go here. You know, for a very iconic painting, man, where's it?
A masterpiece that stares right into your soul. Have you ever felt like a painting is looking directly at you? Then you absolutely must see Diego Velázquez's Pope Innocent X. This portrait isn't just an image. It's a piercing gaze into the very soul of power and human nature. Here are a few surprising facts. Velázquez broke ground by depicting the Pope with relentless honesty. No idealization, just the stark truth of his face and gaze. Contemporaries were astonished. The artist worked on the portrait during his time in Rome, and it took considerable time. He meticulously studied his subject to capture every detail. Pay attention to the shades of red in the Pope's attire. Velázquez was a master of color, and this deep, rich red not only symbolizes power and sin, but also adds drama. Legend has it that Pope Innocent X himself, upon seeing the portrait, exclaimed, "Too truthful. Can you imagine the impact?" As a reward for the portrait, the artist received a massive gold pectoral chain with a miniature portrait of Innocent X in a locket encrusted with gemstone. Take a look at the Pope's hand clutching a document. What could it be? What thoughts are hidden behind this gesture? Every detail here is, no matter where you step, it seems the Pope's eyes are following you. This is an optical illusion created by Velázquez's mastery. Try it yourself. Velázquez didn't just paint a face. He conveyed a complex character, strength, and perhaps even a certain weariness and doubt. This makes the portrait incredibly lifelike. A preparatory head study exists, allowing us to see the artist's process. Diego Velázquez's painting Pope Innocent X itself is housed in the Doria Pamphilj Gallery in Rome, Italy. Why didn't Velázquez sign the painting? The artist rarely signed his works, but here there's a secret sign. On the Pope's ring, a barely visible reflection of light can be seen. Could it be a Velázquez, a masterpiece that stares right into your soul?
Nice. All right. So the last part of this video, we're gonna go into Pope Leo. Pope Leo, Black Ancestry. So this is gonna be the final video about the Black Pope painting I created, and let's get into it right here.
He just keeps making history, and now it's his history that's making news. We have learned that the new pontiff, Pope Leo XIV, descended from Creole people of color from New Orleans. ABC News has actually obtained records and photos of the groundbreaking discovery that shows how the first American Pope's family tree reflects the complex racial history of our country. Joining me now is the genealogist who worked on this discovery, Chris Smothers. Chris, it is so great to see you. Tell me what inspired you to dive into this research in the first place.
Yes, it's so much to talk about. I first learned about this discovery through Jerry Honoré, a fellow colleague and genealogist based out of the Historic New Orleans Collection in Louisiana. And I saw this post and I really felt convicted to go in deeper into these records and begin to explore and peer through to really see what we could confirm through the documentation. And in that process, I began to unravel kind of the seeds of this truth-telling process through these historical records and looked at where the truth was almost omitted in these historical documents. And this highlighted a very complex, nuanced understanding of this family overall.
Amazing that you got the tip from the Raging Cajun, General Russell Honore. So, of course, knows about the history of the people of New Orleans. I love that. So, explain for folks why the Pope's family would mark down their race as white after migrating to Chicago in 1920. Put the history into perspective for us, Chris.
Sure. So there was a collection of, free people of color who migrated all over the United States during the Great Migration. And I, looking through these records, one could kind of infer that it looks like an identity crisis, but I see it as a survival strategy. In this critical point where race is becoming more charged after the passing of the 13th Amendment, it's clear that the family really was trying to navigate economic and social mobility during the early 20th century when they moved to Chicago and passed for white.
Wow. So how much of the Pope's background is a representation, you think, just of the American story as we learn this and start talking about this and discover so much about him that we didn't know?
That's such a layered question. I think that the reality is that Black Catholicism is not a new phenomenon, and it's clear that the Pope's maternal lineage has been rooted in Black Catholicism. I hope this opens up an opportunity to correct historical records, to acknowledge and really reckon with the longer history of how African descendant people were introduced to the faith and, really hold space for the collective power we have to really engage these historical records that hold those secrets of the past.
And people should, I have a feeling we're going to be talking a lot about this more. I'm thinking of St. Catherine Drexel, the white nun who traveled across the country and saw how Blacks and Native Americans were being treated and created schools like Xavier there in New Orleans, and even the school where Lytle Hampton learned how to play the drums through the nuns and Catholic school in Chicago. I mean, it's all coming back together, this rich history, and to find the Pope tied to this rich Black Catholic history is so incredible. And it tells us a lot just about Black history in America and what more we need to learn about this experience. And this has got to be significant for Black Americans, Chris, as this broke yesterday and we're all talking about it. What does it mean to you?
My ancestors were personally descendant of people who were missionaries of the Society of Jesus, and it's a very personal thing. And to reckon with this history truly is culminating. And I feel that we're in a space in public history where we are really beginning to confront the nuances and the realities of this history. I'm someone who is both descendant of people who owned enslaved people and then those who were enslaved. And the same is true for Pope Leo. And so I think that we're in this space now where we can begin to have these conversations with more open dialogue so that we can continue to expand and correct historical narrative and atone for the historical erasure of this very nuanced and complex history.
A complex history of free and enslaved that now includes the Holy Father's family, which is just incredible. Chris Smothers, so appreciate your time and your research. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
For more on the new American Pope, you can see that special on 2020 tonight, 9 p.m., 8 Central, right here on ABC.
So that will probably conclude the stream, the archive stream. So I probably will be back later on.
We'd like to thank Morgan & Morgan for supporting PBS. It feels like we know basically
with the Danger Gang for show. And shit, I don't know, man. Maybe some more Dark Side of the Ring. But tomorrow I might have the archive videos diving into the Pink Gator, the original black painting from my inventory. But for sure, y'all. Definitely see y'all later. Peace.